Hello, and welcome to part 5 in RingCentral's webinar series, The Future is Calling, How to Keep in Touch with Tomorrow's Work Needs. Now today, we're discussing the SMB, small and medium-sized businesses, the landscape and what these organizations should expect in 2023. I am Andy Spence, an independent workforce strategist, and I'll be your host throughout this futuristic journey. Now today, I'm joined by Mirko, Director for SMB Product Marketing at RingCentral, and Nick Kavalanika, Founder and Chief Technical Evangelist at Techvangelism. Now, thank you both for joining me today. Let's start with some introductions. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your journey. So let's start with Mirko.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Mukul Chopri. I've been at RingCentral for a little over 5 years, and I've been focused on the small business marketing team over here. Prior to RingCentral, I worked with small businesses in other roles in other companies based in the Bay Area. Prior to RingCentral, I was at GoDaddy, also working with small business owners. And prior to that, I was with Intuit, working with small business owners as well. And my journey with the small business community goes back to the last financial crisis that happened in 2008, 2009, when I was working with a startup that was helping small business owners get loans. So I'm not new to this situation that we're seeing unfolding before us.
No, it's great to have you on board, and it's great for us today to tap into that experience, which is very relevant, I think, in the next few years. So welcome. Nick, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm Nick Cavalancia. I've got about 30 years of IT experience that spans everything from training adults how to get certified on computer networks to owning a managed IT service provider that serviced small business customers, to being a three-time VP of marketing for 3 different tech companies. I'm also a 4-time Microsoft MVP, which is a designation Microsoft gives for the top IT professionals in the world. I've done that 4 times in a row, and I make my living these days mostly writing and speaking about technology.
That's fantastic. And again, so much experience to draw on here, from marketing to technology within the small business sector. Now, my first question, if you read the business magazines, you'd think that everybody worked for a tech giant in California. But actually, in the USA, nearly half of those employed in the private sector work in firms with less than 500 workers. And in fact, small businesses have accounted for nearly 2/3 of new job growth since the 1990s. So for today's conversation, Mukul, how does RingCentral, for example, define an SMB?
So at RingCentral, we focus on all segments of the market. So it includes small business as well as upmarket segments like enterprises. The way we define small business is it's broken up to 3 subsegments: SOHO, the small office, home office; SB, which we call small business; and mid-market. So SOHO goes from 1 to 10 employees. Small business goes from 10 to 100 employees, and then mid-market becomes these bigger small businesses, which go from 100 to 400 employees.
No, that's great. And as I said before, that's where a lot of job growth is going to come from. So for the purposes of today, we're talking about up to 400 or 500 employees for SMB companies. So let's set the scene. Coming into 2023, we've got a backdrop of inflation and the talk of recessions. What have you observed about the state of SMBs? So let's get the ball rolling with Nick.
The state of the SMB is actually sort of very interesting, where they're trying to figure out ways to be competitive. I like that you open up talking about, you'd think everybody worked for some big tech startup or a big company. Those organizations certainly have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of staffing, a lot of sort of institutional knowledge and expertise in-house. And the SMB, which is interesting, when you mentioned the size of the organizations that you're dealing with, I sort of see it as while headcount is definitely a very easy way to delineate the SMB, it's almost like you see it as a what's the phrase I want to use? It's like just a spectrum of going from having no internal IT support and no infrastructure to having a fair amount of IT support and internal infrastructure, and very simple needs to very complex needs, or more complex needs, I should say. As we're facing some of this issue around a recession, that sort of thing, the SMBs are struggling to find ways to make themselves, like I said, competitive by leveraging technologies where they don't have to augment with infrastructure and staffing, because they just don't have the funds for it. They don't have the expertise for it. And in some ways, as you think about competitiveness being timely, they don't have the time to wait for it either.
No, they're great points. They don't have the infrastructure of larger companies, and they probably have to act even more quickly than some of these larger enterprises. Mirko, what have you observed about the state of SMBs this year, or the last few weeks anyway?
Yeah, I think what I've observed is it's been a very difficult road for the small business owners since the pandemic started. So 2020. I would even it's kind of like a continuation of the bad times, where when the pandemic happened, suddenly we saw the small business owners couldn't operate in the way they did, right? So there was people were not going out. If they had a brick and mortar store, business suddenly dried up, right? So it was extremely challenging. They've been through that challenging cycle, and now they come out of that, and they're looming. The three things that they're hit with. One is inflationary pressures, right? So the cost of their goods is rising, which unfortunately they have to pass on to the customer. The second thing is the borrowing costs are going up. So if they have loans or working capital lines with banks, the rate of borrowing is slowly creeping up. And then the third thing is, because everybody is in the same boat, including the consumers, the consumer demand is drying out. So they're finding themselves in this difficult situation where it's becoming more expensive to create the products and services that they do, and they're seeing fewer customers taking the products and services that they have to offer. So it's definitely a challenging time, but small business owners they're not new to challenging times.
No.
The survey that was conducted even in the middle of the pandemic, and even in that state, small business owners were optimistic. They were.
No.
So I think it's almost like a continuation of that, but it's a different spin on it.
Yeah, and I love your positive spin on this. Actually, this is a continuation over the last 3 years, and small businesses are pretty agile, pretty smart at making changes. And that leads me into a question around digital transformation. So how is the SMB strategy and game plan different to that of a larger enterprise? So Nick's already mentioned that they are different. And it'd be great if you could share some examples, particularly around customer service, if you've got any. Let's start with Mirko.
Yeah, so I think the way small business owners operate, when you contrast them with enterprises, there is no game plan. It's kind of like fly by the seat of your pants and try to figure things out as you go. They don't have the luxury of having consultants coming in and giving them advice. They're just going day to day, month to month. And as the challenges pop up, they start to deal with them. But one example that I have from our own customer base that's really interesting is this company that it's a small business. They're, I think, 30 or 40 employees based in the Seattle area, and they have a cleaning service. So the owner of the business was struggling when the employee who used to set up the appointments for cleanings left the company. So then suddenly he found himself taking those calls, trying to manage his ownership, 20 hats that he already wears for running the business, with also now taking the calls in for scheduling appointments. And at that point, he started looking at options, like what should he do? And he came to RingCentral at that during his, he was searching for options for improving the appointment scheduling, and he came to RingCentral, and he combined RingCentral's services with offshore services in Manila with a company that provided the manpower. So suddenly he was able to open up the number of scheduling calls coming in. From the operating hours went from like 9 to 5 to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So he actually, and for the same amount of capital that he was using for one employee in the US, he was able to get 4 or 5 employees in Manila. And with RingCentral service, he was able to amplify the bookings that he could do. So suddenly he was able to get. He was not able to just meet the prior revenue targets. He was actually able to grow.
I think that's a great example from a crisis where you can't book appointments to actually probably extending the service and reducing the cost using technology. No, I love that example. Nick, what you touched on this around, there are different strategies for SMBs to the larger organizations. What are the kind of approaches that SMBs can use? And do you have any examples that you can share?
I'll actually first echo Mukul's note sort of the idea that the SMB, the small, very small SMB, not so much the Soho, but maybe you take, like, let's say a very small retailer has a couple of employees. It's definitely not a Soho, but it's not some organization that has lots of staff and departments and department heads, and they're still very small. They're certainly just trying to survive, the day, the week, the month, and make sure business happens. The successful, so I echo his sentiment that there is no strategy. But the successful SMBs are the ones that look beyond that and go, okay, what problems am I having? I think, Mukul, I think your example was actually really perfect. Just from the standpoint of what my point I'm going to make is actually exemplified by your example, and that is the idea of the successful SMBs are the ones that go, what problems am I having? Oh, I'm really not getting enough quotes fast enough, or I'm not getting enough orders in, or whatever the challenge is, and go, is there a way I can cost effectively take advantage of cloud technology? And that's the clincher here, because again, SMBs don't have a lot of internal staff and they don't have a lot of internal infrastructure. So that's out. So we're talking about cloud-based solutions and going, how can I figure out a way to address that problem? I mean, even just taking something like, if I could augment my website with a chat that someone could fill out a couple things, I could answer a couple questions automatically, and if not, it sends me an email. At least that's engaging a customer, one more, providing a better customer experience without having to add headcount, without having to add internal infrastructure, adding, IT staffing, all that. I think Mukul's example probably is actually the best one for a couple of reasons. It exemplifies not only what he was talking about, but even where I'm going with this idea of the game plan, the strategy for the SMB needs to be, look at where you can't grow because you don't have infrastructure, because you don't have staffing, and then go, what's out there? There's got to be a service that does this, whatever this is. You can figure out what that issue is and go, somebody does that. And then start searching a lot and find a service that does that, whatever that is. I hope that answers the question, but I think it does.
No, that's a good example, because you always need to be looking out for new services and products that can help you run your business or even give you a competitive advantage. Now, it leads me on to my next question. The pace of innovation has not slowed down for a second, despite our economic woes. So it suggests that 2023 is going to be another busy year for digital adoption. But what do you think will be the biggest priorities for SMBs in 2023? And have you identified any technologies or solutions, or not vendors, but solutions that you think will be important to achieve these goals? Nick, any thoughts?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, we saw a huge influx of priority around digital workspaces, collaboration, meetings, those kinds of things. And motions are addressing kind of the, let's call it the knowledge worker, the worker that needs to interact with somebody and they want to share a file and look at the file together and discuss the contents, or maybe have a meeting, and that's all great and that helps. But going back to something Mukul said earlier about customers, I wanted to add that in addition to everything that he said, which I completely agree with, the customer expectation, despite everything that's going on with retail or with any other aspect of a B2C type business, the customer expectation is increasing in a lot of ways. They are expecting, I'll call it an Amazon-like experience. That is, there's an omni-channel experience where no matter whether they're the vendor via the phone, or I'm texting them in some cases, or I'm doing something online, I want to have a very similar experience as a consumer. I want to have all kinds of communication. I want to know when, in the case of like taking retail as the example, because being like Amazon, I want to know when something ships. And it's actually pretty cool that Amazon tells me that my package is 10 stops away. Doesn't really do anything for me, but it's kind of cool to know nonetheless. But it just shows like really good examples of customer experience, even if it's not entirely relevant. Like I need to know when it's exactly 7 stops away. Like that make no difference either, right? But it's still kind of cool to have that experience. And so I think going back to your question of like, what does digital adoption look like and what are the biggest priorities for this year, is for the SMB to figure out and continue on that idea of collaboration, but do it in a way where you're thinking about the omni-channel experience for the customer. How do we create really great experiences for them, utilizing services? And I don't mean just for retail, and it doesn't just mean B2C, or it could mean any kind of business. Even if it's a services business, just how do you create a great experience for them from beginning to end? And then go back to what I said before, which is, oh, come on, Nick, you're killing me. I don't have enough people to do that. Right, of course you don't. So they're not going to do that. You're going to go figure out what it would look like for your business to have a really great, well, wouldn't it be awesome if customers could, and then insert whatever the answer is, and go, okay, what would a service look like online that would do, you start searching for that to find said service that provides said functionality so that you can create that really awesome customer experience. So I know I'm talking real generalities, but you have so many people that can be listening to this from a wide range of businesses that if I just say, just buy the blue product that'll solve all your problems. Not everybody needs blue. So people need green and purple and yellow. So I'm trying to more give all of you that are watching this more of an opportunity to think about, okay, how do I apply that to my business? And how am I going to make my business far more of an omni-channel experience for the customer?
No, that's great. And Nick, a couple of insights jump out at me here. One is not everybody employs knowledge workers. We've already had an example of a cleaning business, for example. The other is that customer expectations have risen dramatically in the last few years. And so we need to try and match those. And the good news is that there are services and vendors out there that can provide that omni-channel experience, which is positive. Mukul, the same question to you. Have you identified any technologies or solutions that you think will be important this year in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I completely agree with Nick. I think the customer experience is key. It's the customer experience as well as like customer relationships and the community you build around your customers is absolutely vital in a especially a recessionary period that we are entering most likely. And if I think about some examples over there within our customer base, it's even the cleaning company example, right? It started with a problem around how do I fill this gap? I don't have a worker to do scheduling, and he used RingCentral's cloud phone system to allow routing calls to the right rep in Manila. He was able to expand the number of reps and thereby expand the hours of operation. So he was able to get more business because they were open for a longer period of time. But then as he started experimenting with our cloud phone system, he realized that he could also send text to customers, right? And prior to that, with the legacy phone system he had, there was no texting capabilities. It was only calling. Okay. So with the texting capabilities, he started experimenting, and he was like, "Oh, this region in this Greater Seattle area is having fewer bookings." He would start sending discount codes for that area, and he saw revenue jump up. So it started from a cost perspective and just from keeping the lights on perspective, But then as he started playing around with the product that we had, he started learning more features and thinking about like, how could he use the features we have specifically for his customers, right? So I think that line of thinking has to remain completely open, and especially so for small business owners, cash flow is going to be key, right? Like they don't have the luxury of billions of dollars in the bank to go through like the recession. It's like month to month, sometimes week to week. How do you get the cash flow? And what we found and this wasn't our customer. This is a separate story about a small business owner during the COVID time. So when COVID hit, RingCentral wanted to give back to the small business community, and we sponsored this competition called the Small Business School Challenge. It was started by some recent Berkeley MBA grads, and they wanted to help small business owners. And in that competition, MBA students came together in teams over a hackathon, and they helped like small business owners with like, how do we help you through the recession, through the COVID pivot. And one of the small business owners who had entered the competition, she was based in the Boston area, and she had a online radio channel in the Boston area.
Okay.
And her advertisers, the advertisements, they dried up, so her revenue really dipped. And the MBA students, they looked at her situation, and they're like, you know what, you have a strong listener community. See if they can help you raise funds to see you through the next few months. And she opened it up, and funds started flowing in. So it wasn't even a service she was offering. She just had this community that she was that had been listening to her radio channel for free thanks to the advertisers. But once they found out that she was struggling, they contributed, and she was able to sustain through the COVID times.
It's a good example. I mean, maybe the moral of that story is to utilize your networks and your community for good ideas,
Right.
for solutions too. And that wasn't probably a natural ally with the, but you actually initiated a hackathon with the MBA students to come up
Right.
with a solution. No, it's
Right.
a nice example. And listen, what I'd like to talk about a little bit is one trend for this year that I think will be artificial intelligence again, right? And I don't know whether either of you have had a play with ChatGPT, which is basically a natural language processing tool using AI technology. And it allows you to have human-like conversations with a chatbot. And I've had a play, and I think it's very powerful. For example, I asked it for, please give me 3 high-protein breakfast ideas, right? And it gave me 3 very sensible and tasty ideas. But knowing I was doing this show, I also asked ChatGPT, what are the key business trends for small businesses in 2023? Now, thankfully, you guys have mentioned these already, but it gave a pretty good response along the lines of cost management, sustainability, and using digital technology. There were its 3 answers. Now, have either of you had a play with ChatGPT? And do you think it might be useful for SMBs this year?
Yeah, Nick, if you don't mind, I can start, because I had a similar experience to Andy. So in prep for this webinar, I was playing around with ChatGPT as well, and just like you, one of the questions I asked was, what should small business owners do in 2023?
Okay.
And it's spat out a bunch of answers around like cost, customers, revenue, XYZ, create an online store, increase your services online,
Right.
and so increase your geographical reach, all of those things. And then I went down further. I was like, okay, I'm a small business owner in the US. What should I do this year?
Right.
And it added to the mix that track the Small Business Administration, the SBA, because sometimes they would give loans out to small business owners in difficult times. And then I was like, okay, so what are out of the things that you said, what should be my top priority? And it said it depends on your situation. If you have cash flow issues, you should think about the Small Business Administration and talking to your bank about extending your credit line, if you're and it actually broke it down by what in different scenarios I should be doing. And it was just a breath of fresh air.
It's so powerful. Listen, I hope you don't sweat your team like you did ChatGPT with all those questions. Oh my God! But it sounds like it was actually really useful. And but do you think this could be a useful tool for the SMBs?
I think so. Because I feel like it really, what it showed, it felt at a high level. It almost felt like the experience I had, searching on Google during the time of like Lycos and Alta Vista and Yahoo.
You're taking us back here.
It was just ChatGPT was to Google Google was to Alta Vista and Lycos. Because
really interesting.
if I go on Google, I'd have to
Don't forget Ask Jeeves. Don't forget Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves, exactly. So
I do remember Ask Jeeves. Yeah.
It really synthesized stuff that I would have had to go, to like 20 websites, and it just put it all together in one place.
Nick, have you had a look at ChatGPT or similar tools?
Actually, actually, when it first came out, and there was a lot of buzz about it that interested me. And I want to address something just sort of for those that are listening to both Andy and Mukul's examples. And you might be going, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to ask it. And just so I want to kind of put you at ease for a moment first, and then I've got a couple of practical examples as well of something that even I did just to sort of play around with it that you can do as well. Is there's been a lot of statements around this kind of functionality. Keep in mind that ChatGPT isn't just AI, meaning it just isn't just smart on its own. It has access to the web. It is pulling things. That's how Andy was able to get a healthy breakfast or whatever. I've seen other people that are like, give me a kosher sets of meals, and I have one 7-year-old and one 11-year-old. Somebody like saying like really specific things like that. And it gave them that. Make me a grocery list. There it is, right? Yeah. It's brilliant. So for those of you that are thinking about what do I ask, again, it being a Google killer, which Mirko was sort of implying a little bit. He's saying it was what Google was to its predecessors. Just ask. Like normal language, just ask I'm a small business owner. What should I do to blah, 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 whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So don't fret about that. Now you can get a little more sophisticated. And I'll give you just a personal example. At the time, when it came out, I was having an issue with my daughter and her school and the curriculum that was going on. And I had already written a letter to the school it's having and what I thought about it. And I'm fairly articulate and I can write well, blah, blah, blah. So I do that. Then I'm telling a friend of mine, have you heard about this? No, we're at dinner. And I happen to tell him this whole story about what was going on with my daughter. And I go, wait, watch this. And I go, write a letter to a school administration about your 9th grade daughter who's blah, 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 blah. You would not believe how good that letter was. Wow. It was just as good as mine was. And it was now to keep in mind, it's fairly, it lacks personality. I'll say that.
You can ask it to write a letter. School in the style of Shakespeare or in a hip hop style.
Of course, right? You can.
And it's a lot of fun. It does that as well. I don't know what the school would make of it, but Now
the practical use for the SMB owner that's watching or the SMB employee that's watching is let's just take something as simple as like, oh man, I would love to send emails out, or I'd love to send texts out, or I'd love to communicate somehow with my audience, but I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Tell ChatGPT, write me a marketing email about, and then tell it what your service does, and it'll come up with something. I mean, if you don't know what to write, put it this way: if you're not sending anything out at all today, if we go back to grade school and I give you a grade, you're getting an F, right? You're sending nothing, you're getting an F. If you send out something that ChatGPT wrote and you go, oh, it's not that good, or you're getting a C. At least you sent something out, and it's a whole lot better than an F. Don't wait for A work. Don't procrastinate. Use it to your advantage. Ask it the questions that Mirko and Andy are talking about. Ask it to write you something up if you're not sure what to write. It's pretty powerful. It might get you farther ahead than where you are today.
And there's stories of schools banning it. I read that about a school in New York that was banning the use of ChatGPT for essays. And one caveat I would say is it's free at the moment because they want to get lots of data for pilots to improve the service. But at some point, it's going to have to come up with a way of monetizing this. And going back a few years, Google monetized its service, its very good free service, with adverts, right? Paid adverts. So it'd be very interesting to see whether ChatGPT offers a subscription to people for $50 a month, or there are adverts or whatever. But it's free at the moment, but that might change, folks. That's just a warning. But listen, we don't have an awful lot of time. But I really want to talk about. We've looked into the near future at emerging tools. We've talked about some of the backdrop, the drivers. But customer service keeps coming up. It's only growing in importance. Okay, so what do you think customer service will look like this year for these SMBs, Mirko?
Yeah, I think the customer service is key, and one of the things that I've had the opportunity of looking at is how small business owners are tackling it through our products. So, in addition to the cloud phone system, RingCentral also has a contact center. So one of the big reasons why small business owners are getting a contact center solution is because typically they don't have visibility on how the calls that are coming in are being answered, right? So every customer complaint that is coming in, or every call from a prospect that is coming in inquiring about business opportunities with your business, it has a dollar value, right? So if it's a prospect, there's a dollar value for them becoming a customer. If it's a angry customer calling in and nobody's responding, there's a dollar value if that customer leaves you, right? So I think what contact center technology does, and contact center technology on the cloud does, is it gives you that, as a small business owner, it gives you visibility on how those calls are being answered by your employees. And what RingCentral service does is it gives you that visibility from wherever you are. And it gives your employees the opportunity to work remotely and answer customer calls from wherever they are without giving their personal cell phone information. Okay. So it's really changing the game in the sense that we're seeing small business owners struggle to hire the right talent. By having contact center as a cloud service, it really opens it up to all geographies. So
no, it's great. And, we talk about emerging technologies, but the cloud has been really impactful. This technology is available to everyone now, isn't it? It's not just large enterprises, which is an obvious point, but it's there, isn't it? So, Nick, do you have anything to add around that, around customer service for SMBs?
I just sort of rephrase your question. You said what I think it will look like. I'm going to say what I think it should look like.
Okay, well, that's great.
For this year. And it's going to go back to being a little more general. And it's back to thinking about this omnichannel experience for the customer. Think about going a different direction from Mirko. Let's say you're like a private car service, as an example. And I happen to have a friend of mine that owns one in New York City, and he does most of his business via text. It's not a lot of phone calls, as an example. And so having some ability to both market via text, respond via text, maybe even schedule via text, that would make sense for him to adopt that. So it's figuring out to almost expand what Mirko said, because he was giving one example of one solution for a given customer and meeting their need. Customers to figure out, where are my customers, or how do my customers want to interact with me and engage with me in my business, and then figure out the technologies that are going to just smooth that path and just make it super easy. Right. The example of today, like the colleague of mine, the friend of mine that owns this car service in New York, it's pretty much like him or his wife answering texts. That makes no sense. You should be doing some text automation where it's like, hey, I'd like to schedule a car on this particular date. And it goes, great. What are the specific times you'd like to be picked up? What's the address? And have it start asking questions and schedule the whole thing. Why not do that? And there's an ROI for that that's probably unrealized, in that you don't have a person doing that, and that person that already works for you can be doing something else to actually keep your business going and help generate more revenue.
Yeah,
At
there's a
least
health and
that's the feeling.
safety angle to this too.
Yeah.
When you're driving your car around New York, right? You don't want to be thinking about text or WhatsApp or whatever.
That would be bad. That's why I said and his wife.
Exactly.
Yes.
Great examples from both of you. But I want to finish with a question for SMBs this year. Are there any pitfalls or challenges that might surprise SMBs this year to watch out for?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the biggest pitfall is the unknown, right? We can prepare for what we are seeing, but what we cannot prepare for is like how stuff is gonna change, right? Like I don't know if you're tracking the egg shortage that is happening nowadays, right? It's like we don't know what the future is going to bring, but I think for SMBs, the key challenge is going to be staying on top of two things. One is their finances, because that stuff you got to like look at it with a magnifying glass. It's times are different. You got to look at it from like how not just like what you have right now, but what is your bank thinking about? Because when the 2008-2009 crisis happened, I was working at a startup where suddenly small business owners who had no issues with their business, their working capital line dried up for no reason. So that's a possibility, right? So have the conversations with your bank. Don't take anything for granted on the financing side of things. And then on the other side is, as Nick said, keep close with your customers, build a community. That's what is your lifeline out of any difficult time. So
no, that's great. That's really good examples. Nick, any pitfalls to watch out for this year that you can think of to add?
I would say at this point, because the SMB can't necessarily, let's say, can't afford to not be in business, which is always true anytime, but it's definitely this year if we're potentially going into a recession. And for those SMBs that are large enough to have a headcount that can do analytics on any part of your business, to analyze, what's working, what's not working. You heard Mirko talk about a little bit about analytics with call center and seeing some return there and figure out what the costs were. There's actual tangible costs and figuring those out. But doing an analysis of what is and isn't working with your business is kind of necessary. I was at a software company that would technically be an SMB. We were about 125, 150 people, right in the middle of the 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe when saw a slowing down of the economy. And as a VP of marketing, I had built, I'm a left brain, right brain person, very logical, and I built a very large sort of law of big data, like massive numbers of customers coming in, and built a funnel so I could figure out if I had this many customers up here that came to the website, I could literally calculate how many would actually engage with us, how many would turn into an opportunity, and how many would actually buy, and what the average order value was. And we were doing the math so that we could figure out what was changing. Like, for example, we actually found that the people on the website, not really changing. The people engaging with us, not really changing. The conversion opportunity, changing. The conversion to a closed one opportunity, a deal that closed, we made money, changing. The average order value. It was important to see that so we could figure out, okay, now that we have, and I was thinking in terms of a funnel, and those of you watching may not actually be so sophisticated to be thinking of your entire business as a funnel, but if you were, you can go with it anyways. For the moment, we'd look at the funnel and go, okay, how can we impact the funnel? What can we do differently? Because this part right here, wherever that is in the funnel, that's the part that's not working like it used to. And what can we do differently? Now, I'm talking about the overarching revenue of a business. It might be, back to Mukul's example, it might be more about customer service and just really literally trying to help as many customers as you can and get them what they need, figuring that part out. And so it might be that if a business is large enough, looking at the different line of business owners or just business owners of different parts of the organization, having them do some kind of analytics of what's going on in their portion of their business to figure out if is some part of it slowing down, is some part of it performing less or worse than it used to, and so on, and then that way you can figure out what to do.
Great example. It's a great example. Or just ask ChatGPT to do all your work for you.
Right,
that's the other
exactly.
thing. To do your marketing analytics. Guys, listen, you've given some great insights today, some great examples and some great tips. I've really enjoyed the conversation. To summarize it, I would say that we need to obsess about our customers, where they are, what technology they're using, how to communicate with them. We need to think about different services and products that are available to make our life easier for both the top line and the bottom line, right, this year. And to Mirko's point, we can't really predict what's going to happen this year. We had no way of predicting the wars and pandemics of the last 4 years, right? So let's hope it's a nice quiet year for everybody and the economy picks up. But I think we've had some good ideas and insights, and good luck with your business endeavors for the rest of this year. So thank you for attending the 5th webinar in RingCentral series, The Future is Calling, How to Keep in Touch with Tomorrow's Work Needs. A big thank you to Mirko and Nick for sharing their perspectives. Now, for more information, click the attachment section below and do make sure to register for the next episode of the series. See you then.